At this point, I would like to go back to the book of Revelation, the 12th chapter and the 9th verse, and read that verse again. And it reads, "And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceived the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels was cast out with him." A very good and excellent book to read. It's a book entitled The Two Babylons by Alexander Hislop. One of the most interesting things that Hislop say in that book is that the ancient word for serpent in the ancient Sumerian language is can, the word C-A-N. And the word canny, C-A-N-N-Y, means serpent-like. Now, in the Latin language, the word vatic, V-A-T-I-C, means prophet or soothsayer. So if we take can, which equal to serpent, and Vatican, what do we get? We get prophet or soothsayer of the serpent. Now this is the meaning of Revelation 12:9. So what are we saying here? We're making a connection here for those with eyes to see and ears to hear. Scripture tells us that the word serpent is just another name for the devil or Satan. And the book of Revelation, the 12th chapter and the 9th verse tells us that this old serpent was casted out into the earth with his angels to cause a state of chaos, a state of confusion, the Babylonian Mystery of Inequity. And don't think you mere human beings can deal with the satanic organization without the help of God. Without the help of God, the life-giving creative spirit. Without the help of the prophets and the message and the guidelines they brought you to defeat the Babylonian mystery of iniquity. So when they say the Babylonian mystery of iniquity, don't think it's some kind of joke or something. Never forget this. The Babylonian mystery of iniquity is the most sophisticated form of trickery ever developed. It is a masterpiece of deception, rightly called Shaitan's plan to deceive the entire world. Babylon, mystery of iniquity, made all the nations of the earth drunk with the wine of her fornication. Babylon, confusion, chaos, Iraq. Upon her forehead was a name written, Babylon, mystery of iniquity. The Hispanic is in just as much confusion as the African American. And we know the African American is in confusion, and we've had all kind of research to show you where the African American come from. That the African American come from Islamic countries. Now, how do we know that African American come from Islamic countries? Because when you look at the history, basically the only Christian nations or country that you had in Africa was the Coptic Christians of Egypt and Ethiopia. And slaves did not come from these two particular areas over here to the United States. The rest of the continent was Islamic, a huge majority Islamic, and the rest of them paganism, or the old religious nature religion, if you want to call it that. But it is the same African Americans, just like the Hispanic would go through and develop Spain, would become a great nation and educated Europe in the science and the math. The same thing would be happening in the northern parts of Africa. You would have great centers of learning like Sanghay, Malai, Timbuktu, etc. like that. The Atlantic slave trade broke up all of this. So this is the first thing that we must understand where we at here. When you look at the sign of Jonah, the African American, and as I mentioned on the West Coast, when you look at the Hispanics, now these two groups that I just pointed out to you that come out of an Islamic civilization that helped build the world, that helped build Western society. When you're talking about Islamic Spain, when you're talking about Islamic North Africa, this is what built the whole university system that we have in existence today, come from these two sites. The whole ability of everything that the Greeks did, and you got to remember that Greeks inherited most of their civilization from the Egyptians. Socrates pointed this out, and you can find this all throughout the writings of Plato, Socrates. They didn't hide this information, that they got all of their knowledge from the Egyptian. But it's Islamic Spain and North Africa that allowed all of the Greek philosophers and the things that the Greeks was doing to be saved in the Arabic language. African American is the rejected stone that become the head cornerstone. The African American is Daniel's stone that destroys the final transformation of the Babylonian Empire, according to the second chapter of the book of Daniel. So, until the African American and the Hispanics that we got here on the West Coast, until they come back to their senses and get away from the confusion, the Babylonian concepts that have entered their communities and just tearing it apart, all the gang-banging madness. Why do you think it's so much gang-banging among the African Americans and among the Hispanics? I'll tell you why. Because in the background of the African American and the Hispanic is a proven methodology for getting rid of all of this gang banging. And what is that proven methodology? It's the revelations that came to the Prophet Muhammad in the midst of gang banging, in the midst of all these tribes, all of these idol worshiping, fighting for their hoods. Islam solve the problem. Islam made them love each other like brothers. But what's happening now? What's at the center point of this confusion? At the center point of this confusion is the Babylonian mystery of iniquity, the Babylonian religious system. I don't care if you call it the Catholicism, you call it the Protestant denominations, you can call it when they break away from Islam, they become the Sunnis or the Shiites. You're still dealing with that Babylonian religious system. In Islam, when you put any man in between the revelations of the Quran and that human being, you've crossed the line. But so many people get confused when we mention Islam. Now, I like to use the religious system in its pure form before man got their hands on this religious system and broke it up into three parts that we call Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The original name of this religious system, which is identified by the esoteric letter Meme or M, is the Melchizedekian system of high priest kingship. This is a real religious system for planet Earth. These three religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam get away from the Melchizedekian system of high priest kingship. How come they running around in all of these churches, masjids, and synagogues, building all of these tall buildings and temples and stuff, where human beings are starving in the street? How did all of this happen? How did the Melchizedek system of high priest kingship get broken into three parts that we see them fighting against each other over there in Iraq right now? You probably saying to yourself, well, hey, that's not the three religions over there. That's only the Muslims, the Shiites and Sunnis, and they fighting against the Christians, who's Americans, and the Britons coming over there. But there's no Jews over there. Don't fool yourself. The center point of the conflict over there involves Israel. They go all the way back to 1947, really. November 1947, when the United Nations decided that they could partition a land that did not belong to them and create two nations, an Israeli nation and a Palestinian nation, which it didn't belong to either one of them, to the Palestinians or to the Israelis, that particular area. Because when you trace the Palestinians are the Philistines, and they've lost that, and we know what happened in the Old Testament. So who is this area? Who do this area belongs to? This area belongs to what the prophecy said. And I'm going to read that prophecy and talk to you about it in a while. Genesis, the 17th chapter, beginning at the first verse. And when Abram was 90 years old and 9, the Lord appeared to Abram and said unto him, I am the Almighty God. Walk before me and be thou perfect. And I will make my covenant between me and thee, and will multiply thee exceedingly. And Abram fell on his face, and God talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with thee, and thou shalt be a father of many nations. Neither shall thy name any more be called Abram, but thy name shall be Abraham, for a father of many nations have I made thee. And I will make thee exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of thee, and kings shall come out of thee. Genesis, the 17th chapter, the 1st through the 6th verse. Now, there's a lot of hidden information about Abraham, the name Abraham, and I'm getting ready to bring some of the information to light for you, so you have a clear understanding of the meaning when they say the religion of Abraham. Because one thing that those that say that they follow the teachings of Moses, and those that say that they follow the teachings of the Messiah Jesus, and those that say that they follow the teaching of the Prophet Muhammad. When I'm talking about the teachings, I'm talking about the teachings in the Revelation. Well, all three of these particular groups will say that they follow the religion of Abraham. Now, I constantly point out to you there was not three Abrahams, just one Abraham. Let's break down the meaning of that word, because just like I discussed earlier, I talk about Melchizedek. I point out that one of the mistakes that they make when they try to break down the word Melchizedek, they look at it as a personal name. And they do that a lot in the English language. They take the word Yahshua, the Messiah, and they make that into Jesus Christ like it's a personal name. But the same thing with Melchizedek. If you're going to get the understanding of the word Melchizedek, that's taken from the two-part Sumerian word Mel, that means king, and it deals with the physical material world, the control of the physical material world. And Zedek, that means righteousness, and deals with the spiritual world. It is the real religious system for planet Earth. And the reason this religious system is set up in this fashion, without beginning, without ending, they say Melchizedek has 720 degrees of knowledge. This is what they mean. They're talking about all of the knowledge in the physical world, 360 degrees of circle, and all of the knowledge in the spiritual world, 360 degrees of circle. But this Melchizedek and the Melchizedekian system of high priest kingship, this is a religion that's conducive to the dual natures of human beings, the fact that we are spiritual beings manifested here in the physical material world as human beings. So this is a real religious system. And these three major religions call it the religion of Abraham. As I read in the scripture early, before his name was changed, he was called Abram. And they call that as father of heights in the scripture. But if you trace that word back to the Vedic scripture, the Indian scriptures related to Sanskrit, then you will see that the word Abram basically is the same word Brahman, or priest. So that's what we're talking about. He was a priest. That was a title for a priest. Now the other important word is a word that equates to nations, because we know that Abraham moves from being father of heights to father of nations. And they translate this word as Ham, Abraham. Now, I explained to you earlier that the meaning of that word is not Ham, but Kim. It is the root word of chemistry, where we get chemistry from. It's an esoteric symbol, esoteric icon for scientific knowledge, this word Kim. So the real word is priest of Kim. That's the real meaning of that word that they call Abraham. Priest of Kim. In the scripture, when they're talking about nations, they point it out, they equate to that. That's what they're talking about. Priest of Kim. They're talking about scientific knowledge. Now, another word that relates to that, and I want you to keep that in mind, it is the word Bethlehem. And they would try to give you in the old man-made dictionary and try to tell you that that means house of bread or something like that, because the word Beth in the Semitic language means house. But the real meaning of the word Bethlehem is house of Kim, or a school of scientific knowledge. And this is what they mean when they say Jesus was born in Bethlehem. This is one of the meanings of it. See, remember, when the Messiah Jesus was born, an impostor sat on the throne. King Herod the Great. King Herod was an impostor. He was not the true king. The Messiah Jesus was born a king and high priest. In 1947, they discovered what they call the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, the Dead Sea Scrolls is the information that brought to light the truth. It separates the truth from the mythology about the community of Jesus, the teachings of Jesus. They found an entire library almost intact in 1947 in some caves off the Dead Sea. Now, what this turned out to be is the library of the Essene community. And that community was called Qumran. It was the headquarters for the Essenes. And during the time of the Messiah Jesus was the Melchizedek. He was the highest religious authority and the highest political authority. When they talk about in the scripture, John the Baptist living in the wilderness, coming from the wilderness, eating honey and all like that, they're talking about the Essene community. And some of the other individuals that was involved with the Essene community, some of them openly and some of them secretly. Because you remember, Jesus had a lot of secret followers also that did not follow him openly, like Joseph of Arimathea or Nicodemus. See, they were high within the religious political government of Judea at that particular time. It's important to understand that you had four major religious parties, I would say, during the time of the Messiah Jesus. And some of them that you are familiar with, some of them you aren't. You had the Pharisees, the Sadducees. Okay, the Sadducees were, their vested interests had to do with the Passover and the economic returns from providing the pilgrims, the things that they needed for the Passover. So you had the Pharisees, you had the Sadducees, you had the Essene, and you had the Zealots. Now the Essene and the Zealots was the same party. One was the Zealots was the underground resistance against the Roman Empire. Because keep in mind that during the lifetime of the Messiah Jesus, they lived within an occupied superpower, the Roman Empire. Now, one of the ironic things when you think about it, because and we will be talking about it in details, the repentance of Nineveh, of Iraq. But the Western superpowers at this moment is occupying Iraq the same way Rome occupied Judea, and had similar struggle too when you think about it. If you want to detail information about the true history, about the time period that the Messiah Jesus lived in, what was really happening in this time period, and not the little fairy tale atmosphere that they're trying to give you now, pick up the works of Flavius Josephus that wrote the Jewish wars and the iniquities of the Jews. And here he talk about the wars between the Romans and the Jews. The first major one, 66 A.D. to 73 A.D., where the temple was destroyed in 70 A.D. And then later on, the Bar Kokhba rebellion, 132 A.D. to 135 A.D. Now these are the type of information that you should be reading if you really want to find out the truth about the Messiah Jesus, or if you want to stay within the orbit of just a Babylonian religious system. Keep being a sun worshiper. Keep letting that be your day of worship. Keep dealing with the Easter eggs, the Easter bunnies, the Christmas trees, the rabbits, the crosses, all this kind of vampire type madness, the Babylonian religious system. Or do you want to follow the true teachings of the prophet? Remember what the Messiah Jesus told his followers in John 8:31-32. And Jesus said to those Jews that followed him, if you continue in my words, you are my disciples indeed. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. But let's go back to Abraham, the religion of Abraham, the Melchizedekian system of high priest kingship, the meme factor, the 3 stages in the development of the human spirit here in the physical material world. And those 3 stages are Moses, that means to draw out; Messiah, that means picked out; and Muhammad, that means stand out. The 3 stages in the development of the human spirit here in the physical material world. Now, I have a question for you, son of Jonah. And no matter what you try to call yourself, descendants of the slaves of America, African American, I know you're the son of Jonah. And I don't care if you say you're Muslim, you're Christian, you're Jew, you're Hindu, you're idol worshiping, it don't matter. The destiny of the descendants of the slaves of America is tied together. So you better try to wake up and start waking up your brothers and sisters. You better stop going into these churches by yourself, these masjids by yourself, and these synagogues by yourself, and let Moses, the Messiah Jesus, and the Prophet Muhammad be your guide. Now these were some real preachers. They were in the trenches. One of the things that they don't tell you about Islam, they don't tell you about the Prophet Muhammad. Ask them to explain this to you. Ask them why they started the Hijrah as the beginning of the Islamic calendar, which was almost 12 years after the mission of the Prophet Muhammad started, as if his first 12 years of preaching, they want to forget about that. Ask them to tell you why, and then listen to all the little silly answers that they try to come up with. The real reason is that they want to take the focus out of the first 12 years of the mission of the Prophet Muhammad that was in the trenches, preaching, letting these old idol worshiping know that there ain't but one God. Tell them how wrong the old Christmas tree and the old Easter egg and the Easter bunny and the cross and all that idol worshiping is, all this the Sunday is, instead of really following the true teachings of the Prophet. So the Prophet Muhammad was a real preacher. And you know the Messiah Jesus, you know his nickname was the Word, because he was a preacher. What did he preach? He told you what the greatest commandment was. The greatest commandment from God. And he repeated it often. Hear ye, O Israel, the Lord thy God is one God. Monotheist. You are to love God with all your heart and all your soul. And then you are to love your neighbor as yourself in a reciprocity concept of mercy. The real teachings of the Messiah Jesus. Take some time right now, and we're still talking about Babylon. Let me talk a little about the Apostle Paul. Because the Apostle Paul had really gotten a bad reputation. Apostle Paul, probably one of your most important theologians that you got out here. But the thing is, anytime that you put an apostle before a prophet, then you're going to run into problems like Western society is running into today. Every time they pick up a Bible to preach a sermon, first thing coming out of their mouth is the teachings of the Apostle Paul. Now here's the thing that you got to understand about the Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul did his job. Now we know the history. I'm not going to go through the history. Pick up the book of Acts if you want to read the history of how Apostle Paul was a bounty hunter first. But the most important thing is that the Apostle Paul was the one that was picked out by the Messiah Jesus, according to the Scripture, and later on, James, the brother of Jesus, to be the one that takes the teachings of the Jesus to the Greek Gentile world. He was the one that took it to places like Ephesus, Thessalonica, Galatians, Rome, etc., places like that. Now, let's look at how this really happened so we have this clear understanding. Now, they were allowed, the Apostle Paul, he received written permission, from the apostles, the followers, the disciples of Jesus, to take the teachings of the Messiah Jesus to the Greek Gentile world, the educated world of the time. Because the world that the Messiah Jesus now lived in, this was not the center point of education. The Greek Gentile world, Asia Minor at that time, and the Greek language. So Paul, he was the one, he was bilingual. He spoke both Hebrew and Greek. So he was the one more fitted to do that. And he did his job. Now, let's explain what happened. Because Paul would enter the Greek Gentile world with the monotheistic teachings of the Messiah Jesus. And here's the problem that he ran into. And remember earlier, I mentioned earlier that he was allowed to relax 2 of the laws of Moses, the kosher law, in terms of you didn't have to follow the strict dietary law, the kosher law, and they didn't have to be circumcised. These was the 2 laws that was relaxed for the teachings of the Messiah Jesus that the Apostle Paul took into the Greek Gentile world. Now, the problem that Paul ran into had more to do with economics than religion. Because the major economics of the Greek Gentile world were the makings of idols. And it was a polytheistic society, mainly the Babylonian religious system. This is what you had. Because the Greeks had inherited, as I mentioned earlier, the majority of their civilization through the Egyptians, but also their contact through the Persians, and the Persians had inherited their civilizations from the Babylonians. So the Babylonian religious system was a religion of the Greek Gentile world, polytheism. They had Christmas, December the 25th, Easter egg, the cross that stood for Tammuz. Sunday was their day of worshiping. The rabbit, the fertility cults, and all like that. They had all of this in the Greek Gentile world. Now, each one of these particular polytheistic gods, see, these particular union guilds, they made their money through making gods and stuff for these various gods, for these different groups and organizations. Now, when Paul hit the Greek Gentile world, especially when he came to the area of Thessalonica, this is where he ran into a problem. Because these Masonic Greek union guilds aligned themselves with the Jewish community to try to assassinate Paul. And each one had a vested interest, The Jews in Thessalonica, they looked upon this as being heretics, as breaking away from the teachings of Moses. And the polytheists, the union guilds, Paul's teachings of one invisible God, not a God made by your hands, threaten their economic life. Now, this is the major problem later on when you study the early days of the mission of the Prophet Muhammad. He ran into the same problem. There was 360 some idols in the Kaaba at that particular time. And they had 4 holy months in which the various tribes would come from all over Arabia and the forest areas to worship their particular god. So we was talking about a huge amount of money that was involved with polytheism. It was doing this way during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, and it was doing this way during the time of the Apostle Paul. And it was also doing this way on a smaller level with the Sadducees controlling the temple. But the Apostle Paul, when he entered these areas, and here's what happened. Apostle Paul entered these areas, and he began to go around to the various houses of people that wanted to hear about the Messiah Jesus, the teachings of the Messiah Jesus. And he went from town to town, from Thessalonica to Galatia, Ephesus, Rome, places like that. Now, when he come to Thessalonica, this is when the alliance between the union guilds that made idols in the Jewish community, this alliance tried to assassinate Apostle Paul. Apostle Paul was arrested. He claimed Roman citizenship. They didn't know he had Roman citizenship, which meant a lot. And so while Paul was in custody, remember he was in custody most of the remaining part of his life. But while he was in custody, these communities that he set up slipped back into the world. This is why the letters that Paul wrote back to these communities have such an urgency to them. Tell them, hey, don't do this, don't start, basically don't start doing the things, all this idol wishing, this polytheism you used to do. Don't go back to doing it. If you look at some of the letters of the Apostle Paul's, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, etc., like that, it has that type of urgency to it. Now, a good book to read on this particular time is called The Ancient Lowly by Osman C. Ward. And he discussed this time period and talked about all these union guilds and what was happening in Asia Minor. Now, the point that I also want you to keep in mind is how much of a central event the destruction of the temple in 70 AD was among the teachings of Moses and the Messiah Jesus. This particular event, this is where I recommend that you read the works of Flavius Josephus that talk about the Jewish wars. But this particular event, because Rome, the 10th Legion, when they would destroy the temple in 70 AD, and then later on in 73 AD at Masada, this was the Zealots' last stand. But one of the things that Rome would do is they would take all of the male slaves. And you got to remember, you had real black dog Yahudites, and send them to the various colonies that they had. And they had colonies like, if you want to read, like Julius Caesar talk about in his Gallic Wars, and we're talking about the conquest of Gaul, which became France, and then the conquest of Germany, and so they sent these black Jewish slaves that they had taken through the fall of Rome into the various colonies that they had, France, Germany, etc., like that. One of the most remarkable things that come out of the Jews that went into Germany, and that's a whole nother story itself, but just to make it a little short side note on that, is the real development of what they call Yiddish. See, this is a proof of what happened in history when these particular black Jews go into Germany. And you remember, there wasn't no females that went with them because Rome kept the female slaves for their own use. So they go into Germany and they take German wives, okay? Out of them, this particular mixture, the thing that allowed the Jewish element to survive and rise to the top of the German society was the economic concept of tithes. The laws of Moses was so superior to the other pagan religion and pagan economic systems that they had in Germany. So this allowed them to raise to the top with the concept of tithes. 10% belongs to God. And out of that mixture came that Yiddish language. And Yiddish is only half German, half Hebrew. Now the next important event in the chain happened July the 4th, 325 AD. And it was at a place called Nicaea, and it's known in religious history as the First Nicene Council. And now this is a very important council. Let me just give you a little background on it. This council was called by Constantine the Great, who was the emperor of Rome at the particular time. He had just come to power through, he wasn't a Christian at the time, but his mom was a Christian. And as the story goes, on the field of battle, the night before the battle, Constantine saw a vision in the sky of a cross, and it said, with this symbol, you will win. And he put this on the front of all his soldiers. They went into battle. They were victorious. So Constantine, he decided to make Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. But the mistake that he made, he didn't realize that you had two trends of the teachings of the Messiah Jesus that I had mentioned earlier, the one that went to Asia Minor, the basic teachings of the Apostle Paul, and the ones that come directly through the immediate disciple of Jesus, and then it would go on into Arabia and Ethiopia and places like that, the Hanifites or the Coptic Christians. But during the time of Constantine, you had these two trends, and they viewed the Messiah Jesus differently. This is what separated them. The major point that separated the two was the deity of the Messiah Jesus. The ones that come to Asia Minor, the Western concept that was used to deifying and the deification of ancestors, gods and goddesses, they were used to that kind of thing. But the Eastern world, different. The laws of Moses, different. So this is the thing that separated them. When the Western world, Asia Minor, through the teachings of the Apostle Paul, tried to deify the Messiah Jesus, this is what separated the two. So Constantine, when he became aware of that, he called his first church council, 325 AD, July the 4th, and they had to decide these issues. And they ended up deciding in favor of the teachings that came through Asia Minor, etc., the teachings of the Apostle Paul. Now, what made this event so important is that this is the beginning of the Roman Universal Church. And the word universal means Catholic. And we know that the word Rome is interchangeable with Babylon, with Iraq, the area over there. So this is the beginning of the Roman Catholic Church. July the 4th, 325 AD, at the First Nicene Council. So this is the mother of all these rituals that we see in our midst today. Christmas and Easter, the Babylonian ritual of the birth and death of the Son, the Roman Universal Church, 325 AD at Nicaea. All these modern day denominations sprang from the Roman Universal Church, July the 4th, 325 AD. The mother of harlots made all the nations of the earth drunk with the wine of her fornication. They talking about all of these Babylonian rituals that make up the Babylonian religious system, the Babylonian mystery of iniquity, the deification of Nimrod, the mighty hunter. All of this sprang from the area of Mesopotamia, sprang from Babylon, from Iraq, the area that's at the center point of warfare this moment. The Babylonian religious system sprang from this area. It started here and it have invaded all of the nations of planet Earth. The Babylonian mystery of iniquity. The Babylonian religious, political, and economic system. Messiah Jesus said, the only sign I give you is the sign of the prophet Jonah. What do you think he's talking about? Jonah had a mission. That mission was to warn the Ninevites. The Ninevites is the same as Babylon. The habitation of Ninus is the meaning of Nineveh, which was a capital city of the Assyrian Empire. So the mission of Jonah was to warn the Ninevites. If the mission of Jonah was to warn the Ninevites, then the sign of Jonah for this generation have the same mission. Warn the Ninevites. Warn the Babylonian Empire. Warn the United States of America. You see, are you paying attention? We live in a time of birth pains. Are you paying attention? The floods, the earthquakes, hurricanes, wars and rumors of wars, poverty, hunger, despair, a world where very few people seem to care. Are you paying attention? So Pilate had called the Messiah Jesus to the side. He said, are you the king of the Jews? Messiah Jesus said, are you asking this of yourself, or did someone else tell you about me? Pilate said, am I a Jew? Your own people deliver you unto me for judgment. Am I a Jew? Messiah Jesus said, I come to bear witness to the truth. All of those that of the truth would hear my voice. Pilate said, what is truth? And he had walked away. You know, the irony of the situation is that probably the only person in the universe who could have answered that question was standing before Pilate. But Pilate had walked away. If Pilate hadn't walked away, Jesus might have told him about the men of Nineveh who should rise up in judgment of this generation and condemn it. Because they repented at the teachings of Jonah, and one greater than Jonah was there. But Pilate hadn't walked away. If Pilate hadn't walked away, then Jesus might have told them about the Queen of Sheba who shall rise up in judgment of this generation and condemn it. Because she traveled from the forest coast of Africa to behold the wisdom of Solomon. behold, one greater than Solomon was there. But Pilate had walked away. If Pilate hadn't walked away, Jesus might have told him what he told those other disciples that followed him. If you continue in my words, you are my disciples indeed. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And with those liberating words, I leave you like I greeted you, with the greetings of all of the servants of God. Peace be upon you.
Silence, and I hear you. I hear you. A poem could be safer, but the voice is really greater in the mix of time and the digging lobby flavor. A poem could be safer, but the mix is really greater in the mix of time and the digging lobby flavor. A poem could be safer, but the voice is really greater in the mix of time and the digging lobby flavor. A poem could be safer, but the voice is really greater in the mix of time and the digging lobby flavor. A poem could be safer, but the voice is really greater in the mix of time and the digging lobby flavor. A poem could be safer, but the voice is really greater.